Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Yeah.
We're the place that takes stacks of info and, well, pulls out the best nuggets for you. Today, we're tackling something humans have wrestled with forever, basically, managing our emotions. This deep dive looks at how we went from some pretty drastic historical stuff to the modern science-backed ways we handle emotional well-being now.
Exactly. And we're going to unpack some really fascinating research insights. We'll touch on work by folks like Professor Ethan Kross. He's a key psychologist and management expert in this area. Our mission really is to understand why our emotions aren't always the villain,
Hmm.
and how we can actually use them effectively for better performance, stronger relationships, just better well-being overall. You should walk away with some practical tools, definitely, and maybe a fresh look at something very personal.
Okay, so let's unpack that history a bit. It's kind of amazing how far we've come. Historically, people took emotional dysregulation, that feeling of being out of control, super seriously. What were some of those really extreme methods they actually used?
Oh, it's quite shocking when you look back, seriously. Past methods included things like trepanation.
That's the skull drilling one, right?
That's the one, drilling holes in the skull, and medieval bloodletting, too. Even much later, like the 1930s, you had the frontal lobotomy becoming a thing.
Wow.
Yeah, it really shows this deep, almost primitive urgency to control overwhelming emotions. But obviously, they lack the understanding we have today. It just highlights how desperately humans have always wanted to manage what's going on inside.
It really paints a picture, doesn't it? That desperation for control. Did those methods suggest they thought emotions were like external invaders or diseases to be cut out?
Kind of, yeah. Often viewed as something bad that needed removing, bleeding it out, cutting it out, which is just fundamentally different from how we see it now, that emotions actually serve a purpose.
Makes you pretty grateful for modern psychology. No skull drilling needed, thankfully. So we've seen those extremes. But now, our scientific view has shifted dramatically. This newer perspective, it feels like a huge leap in, maybe, human self-mastery. And it challenges that old idea, the one we're often taught, that negative emotions are just bad. You're saying research flips that on its head.
Absolutely. It raises this really important question. What if negative emotions aren't the enemy? Science suggests they evolved for a reason. They act as important signals, like information. So the goal isn't just squashing the negatives or making them disappear.
Okay, so if they're signals, what kind of information are they giving us? How do we, like, decode them?
That's the key question. Think of anxiety maybe as a signal to prepare, or that there's risk involved, or anger could signal a boundary's been crossed, something like that. The insight is to listen to the signal, not just try to mute it immediately. And crucially, managing emotions isn't only about the negatives, it's also about enhancing the positive ones. Doing that can really boost things like your work performance, your relationships, just overall well-being.
Right, so if we're not just suppressing them, what are we doing instead? The sources mention emotional shifters. Tell us about those.
Yeah, research has actually identified dozens of these shifters. They're broadly grouped into two types of approaches, inside out and outside in. It's a helpful framework just to understand the different ways we can regulate our emotions.
A whole toolbox, not just one fix. Can you give us a taste of some other tools before we dive into the main ones?
Sure. So beyond what we'll focus on, inside out could include things like mindful breathing or maybe journaling your thoughts. And outside in might be as simple as, say, changing your physical environment or even just adjusting your posture. Lots of options.
Interesting. Okay, let's dive into that inside-out approach first.
Mhm.
The sources really highlight something called perspective shifting. How does that actually work in practice?
Well, a really well-proven method here is distanced self-talk.
Distance self-talk.
Yeah, it involves using your own name or the pronoun you when you're thinking through a problem or feeling distressed.
So talking to yourself, using your name. Like,
Yeah.
okay, your name, what's going on here?
Exactly like that. Or, okay, you can handle this. It might feel a bit weird at first, honestly,
Ah,
but that initial awkwardness, that little bit of distance is actually key. It sort of tricks your brain into seeing your situation more like a third party would from the outside.
oh,
And that makes it easier to give yourself more rational, balanced advice, almost like you're coaching a friend through it.
that is a neat trick for the brain. Does it always work?
Mm.
Or are there times it's maybe less effective? And what's happening neurologically?
Good question. It seems to work because it engages the prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of the brain, which helps dial down the amygdala, the more emotional reaction center. It's very effective, but Probably most helpful when you have a moment to reflect, maybe not in the absolute heat of a crisis second.
Gotcha. Okay, what about the outside-in tools then? How can factors outside us help manage what's inside? I mean, I've definitely had times where just talking to a friend gave me a totally different perspective, like a mini emotional advisor.
That's a great analogy, and it connects perfectly. Think about how companies often have a board of advisors, right?
Right.
Individuals can basically do the same thing. Curate your own group of trusted people, your personal emotional advisors. These are the people who can really listen, first off, validate what you're feeling, which is huge, but also, importantly, help broaden your perspective, get you unstuck. Other people often have that crucial objectivity simply because they aren't tangled up in your specific problem.
That makes a lot of sense. And this leads us to another concept I find really intriguing, emotional contagion. It's almost like this hidden force, how we influence each other's feelings without even realizing it sometimes. Is that the idea?
That's exactly right. Emotions can spread really quickly between people, like catching a mood.
Right, like walking into a room where everyone's stressed,
Hmm.
and suddenly you feel it too.
Precisely. Or the opposite, how one really positive person can lift the whole group's spirits. What's fascinating and really powerful here is realizing it's a two-way street. Being aware of how you might be influencing others emotionally, and just as importantly, how their emotions might be affecting you. That awareness is essential. It's key to mastering your own emotional landscape,
Yeah.
understanding that dynamic.
So putting this all together,
Mhm.
what does it mean for our actual ability to control our emotions? Is the goal to, like, prevent bad feelings from ever happening? Or is it something else?
That's a really central question, isn't it, about our agency? Look, we can't always stop an emotion from arising in the first place. That's probably unrealistic. But the core message from the research is that we have significant control over how those emotions unfold, how they play out, how much they impact us.
So steering them, maybe, rather than stopping them?
Exactly, steering them, navigating them. And there's no single magic bullet, no one-size-fits-all solution here. You really should experiment with these different tools.
Oh.
The self-talk, the advisors, awareness of contagion, see what works best for you and your goals. And ultimately, just believing you can get a handle on your emotions, that belief itself is a huge first step. It's a prerequisite, really. It's not about becoming emotionless like a robot. It's about trusting you have the tools, the capacity to manage how these signals affect you instead of just being swept away.
Wow. Okay, so we've really journeyed from, well, trepanation all the way to strategic self-talk. It seems crystal clear that managing emotions isn't about suppression anymore. It's about uh, skillful regulation.
That sums it up perfectly. In essence, this deep dive really shows how far we've truly come. From those, frankly, destructive historical practices to these incredibly constructive science-backed tools we have now. It's about leveraging things like cognitive reframing, that perspective shifting we talked about. It's about building those supportive relationships, your advisors, and just being mindful of that emotional contagion effect that really represents a major step forward in sort of human self-mastery.
So that brings us to our final thought for you, the listener, to consider. If your emotions really are these informational signals, what might yours be trying to tell you right now? And based on everything we've discussed, what's maybe one tool, just one, that you might experiment with to try and listen a bit more effectively?